Hey everyone, welcome to the latest edition of the We Talk Politics podcast. I am your host, Corey Tanisoff, joined by my co-host, Gerald Mendoza. Gerald, how you been? It's been a while on this one.
Yeah, I mean, we take these unexpected hiatuses from time to time. But I mean, hey, I've been good. Been doing pretty great. Uh, I wonder how much politics has happened since we've been off.
Well, I would love to tell that to you. And it's a good thing that we have an hour to do so. So,
Yeah.
uh, we're going to start right now with one of the biggest things that will not seem consequential until about next year. And then 3 years from now, it will become really important. And that is the 2020 census had just gathered all of its data and formed back an apportionment of the United States House of Representatives, and in turn influenced the electoral college votes that will come out for the presidential election. As is, you take your representatives and your senators, you add those together, and that's what you get.
Right, exactly. Full disclosure here, I did work for the census over the summer for 8 weeks as a canvasser. Uh, Still technically not legally allowed to disclose personal information that I was able to find out, but this is all public information published by the census, so this is no quarrels about this. And I want to share this image. It shows a pretty good idea of what we're dealing with here in terms of certain states did lose representative seats, and it did get shifted around because there's no losing a seat and then it's gone forever. The law states that you have to move seats around based on where the population is growing, is shrinking, or is moving around. As you can see, the different colors. Green means that you've gained a seat, that you've gained seats. Purple means that you lost one seat. And this dark green over here for Texas is important because it means that they gained, um, what is it? They gained 2 seats. All right. So, in terms of, I can zoom in over here. This means the 38 votes electorally that they have right now will go up to 40 votes. Um, well, actually, I'm sorry. This is the number of
They,
representatives. So add
so
two
they,
senators.
they, they had 38, and now
They
it
had
goes up.
38. Yeah.
Correct. And now it goes up to 40 with the two senators included on this number.
Yeah. Any numbers you see on this, because this is the House of Representatives, add 2 numbers to this. This is the electoral votes that each state has. So that means Illinois now has 19 electoral votes altogether. Ohio has 17 electoral votes. Florida now has 30 electoral votes. And California stays at 54, technically, only losing one seat, but gains in what you would call predominantly, or at least more statistically, Republican states, if you will. But something to keep in mind about that, especially in Texas, everybody's thinking, oh, Texas's power just went up. Big red Texas. You got to remember, Texas, first of all, was a swing state last election. It took until maybe 1 a.m. when we were still awake doing our supercast for Texas to be called. Secondly, you have to remember that the people who are moving into these new states, especially the Florida, Texas, Montana, and all these places, they're moving there because tech companies, for the most part, are moving there. They're finding it a lot easier to operate with a lot less government regulation and taxes in their way for them to be able to develop the technologies that they want to do and work with the systems that they want to work with. And it seems to be, having an influx of people into the state now, which is that's good for the state, but that also means the demographic of the people is changing. I think Houston, Texas, is really the city that is shining star of fastest growing in the nation right now. Charlotte, North Carolina is up there in the top three, hence why the state of North Carolina also gained a seat. Florida, many people are moving away from their home states and going to Florida because the taxes are easier to deal with. The weather's nicer. It's just, it seems to be a lot more lax on government regulations. So, but that doesn't mean that everyone who's moving there is automatically going to be a Republican, especially in these urban areas, especially in Texas with Houston growing, and I think San Antonio as well is up there, and the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They are very much getting an influx of more younger, college educated, and more, I would say, skewing towards a liberal minded population that is growing in these cities. And it'll make it even more interesting when these election cycles come to see how that demographic shift is happening. Also, not to mention, and I only just thought about this, the influx of immigration that is happening because of the new administration opening a few more doors for immigrants to be able to come to this country from Latin America means that there's also going to be an influx of Latino voters who predominantly, even though I've said more on not a moral standpoint, but more of a social standpoint, are naturally conservative, but whoever isn't going to try to deport them is who usually gets their votes, and that seems to be squarely on the Democratic side, more so than the Republican side right now.
Unless you have Latin American, and I guess not so much Latin American, but you have Cuban immigrants coming up into Florida who tend to historically be Republican voters.
Oh, that's because they hate communism and Castro. So does that make any sense?
It's an
So,
interesting analysis how Cuba is separated from every other Latin American or Central American voting bloc.
I mean, yeah, it's just, I mean, it's not insane to me to think about simply because the history of communism in Latin America and then authoritarianism and just the defiance they have against people, but the quality of living that it defiance against the American state, but the quality of living has been so low that people have been literally swimming from Cuba to Florida for years. So that, I mean,
Well, not people have been doing that one trip for years.
right.
Different people have been taking that trip.
Yes, exactly. And
You didn't
up
start
in
5 years ago and you're still on your way.
that's that's true. Um, the I think the only recently in the last year or so, last year or two, has there been a shift in they call it the wet foot policy, where if you come from Cuba and land on American soil, you're automatically granted amnesty considering the situation in Cuba. But now that they have opened, I think actually it was the Obama administration on its way out changed that ruling. Now that they have opened technically diplomatic ties between the United States and Cuba, there is no longer that avenue where, as if you're from Cuba and you get here legally, no matter what, you're going to be able to stay simply because of the situation back home. Now they have more diplomatic openness towards each other to be able to discuss these issues and find a different way to manage what you would call an influx of people into Florida and that area around Miami. Um, doesn't change the fact that it's still a precarious situation in Cuba that causes Cubans to, when they get here and when they get their citizenship through the certain means that are available in the state or wherever they end up going, um, they still have a disdain for the way their government was run in their previous home country. So now when they get a chance to have their say in the American election, anything that sounds like government overtaking control of the people and controlling everything is definitely a no-no on the Cuban side.
I was taking another look at the map of the reapportionment, and I think it's very interesting to note that aside from you've got Minnesota and Wisconsin, and I suppose a small sliver of Indiana, and maybe up to Vermont. Those four states could be considered around Great Lake area, but there are only two states that don't touch the Great Lakes that did not lose a seat. And those two states are West Virginia and California, because Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York all touch on different lakes there. So I think it is very interesting seeing that a lot of these seats that are being lost to, I suppose you could say, random states at a certain point. Montana picks one up.
Right.
Oregon picked one up. Colorado picked one up, but I think that's for one certain reason. North Carolina picked one up, but we saw Texas and Florida coming. These were we had talked about this for the past year.
And
We
if we
knew
think
those were
about it, North Carolina as well, we can add to that list.
right. It's a retirement area. You go there with, and you take you and your money. And if you lived in New York or Pennsylvania, or if you lived in New York, or if you lived in Illinois, you can move to North Carolina and not have to pay as much in your retirement. I was interested that Maryland did not lose a seat, considering the mass exodus of retirees from Maryland that have been leaving the state. But I guess it also shows that Maryland is growing in education enough to bring in young people where the retirees and veterans are leaving down south for Florida and Texas.
Well, you also got to remember this thing about Maryland is that let's be honest here, the paychecks here are fat
Yeah.
in general compared to almost anywhere else in the country. I mean, look at the median household income in Howard County or in Anne Arundel
Well, you
County,
could
and
also take that and look at the median household income in Somerset County, and you're going to get a vastly different number.
you are, but there's more money coming in than there is leaving the state right now,
Right.
I think.
Per capita, you will have one of the highest numbers of monetary like incentive to stay. But when
And
you're
it's
not working anymore, it's a retiree's haven to leave Maryland
yeah,
and
exactly.
go to
It really
Florida.
is.
Yep.
Yeah. Honestly, it is what it is. It's like Maryland's a great state to work in, but not necessarily a good one to retire in, I guess. Um, but I think the really important thing about this is not only does this I guess you would consider it shift the dynamic, how close the House is right now in terms of the control that the Democrats have. This does shift some power out of their way. It does give them a seat in Oregon that they're almost most likely to be able to pick up, or Colorado that they can try to swing their way. But in terms of depending on how they district it in Texas, Florida, North Carolina, and Montana, almost definitely are going to be more so Republican seats than not. And that can make a huge difference in these upcoming midterm elections 2022
Especially
to see
considering that we're at a near deadlock right now
exactly
and coming up
it's
towards any election, one seat could change the entire tide of what passes and what doesn't.
it will be an interesting practice in the ability to of the states to be able to wield their power, so to speak, or their majority in one way or another, knowing that one seat could make or break an entire bill or decision and all that.
Indeed. And I will have to agree with you on that. And with that, we will move on to our next topic here, which is the historic proposal for a massive infrastructure bill that is expected to pass in the House and Senate and go directly through the president without him having to veto it because of his, I guess you could say right now we do have a Democratic trifecta. And if they want something to work in their government, it will happen. So earlier in March, the House, or I suppose it was in May, the House sent the GOP a $1.7 trillion proposal, which was down from a $2.3 trillion proposal sent from the president. And this just hit last week. And the GOP is expected to send a $1 trillion infrastructure counteroffer, which is up from their original proposal of around $500 billion. So we are looking at a new deal that could help out the infrastructure, and infrastructure normally meaning roads, buildings, bridges, tunnels, anything that has to do with public land use that would normally be included in it. And the fact that I think is very interesting is the GOP wanted a $568 billion plan for it. Joe Biden originally wanted a $2.3 trillion deal on it, and now it's down to 1.7. And still, they're not willing right now to push with the might that they have in all three chambers, or I guess both chambers and in the executive branch. And instead, they might come to a deal with the GOP to make it around $1 trillion. What do you think about that, Bill?
In terms of the deal itself, I'm going to break down some of the numbers I have, and I did put a link into most of our mostly used websites, and then also to this specific article by USA Today that I'm going to be taking some of this information out of. But in terms of how the Democratic trifecta, as we're calling it, is operating, I did not expect them to be wielding this ability so lackadaisically. So weak minded in terms of how they're trying to push through things. Because if there was a Republican trifecta, there would be bills up the wazoo being signed and passed and signed and passed and signed and passed. And
Well,
I
we saw
mean,
complaints about that during Trump's first
his
term.
first 2 years in office were that of a
Yeah, his first
Republican
2 years, I
trifecta.
should say.
Yeah, his first 2 years of his administration were Republican trifecta, and he did get a lot of things passed. And I like I said, I mentioned to you earlier before we started the show. I don't know if it's Democrats trying to find a way back towards the decorum between the parties, but I believe the Republican Party has moved past that and are more willing to focus on the needs of their voter base instead of trying to find a consensus in terms of how this government is going to function. Um, they are also on the defensive, so they'll nag at just about anything, if we're being honest, even though it is an infrastructure bill. It is a huge amount of money. I mean, we talked about it earlier. This year alone, I think we've passed or almost gotten ready to pass an extra $6 trillion in spending. Um, in in our government, six. We're not even halfway through the year yet. $6 trillion in spending.
Well, there
We
was the original March bill that was proposed as soon as Biden got into office, which was the COVID relief. And I believe
Yeah.
a second one of those go out. And then we now have this, which is gearing up. And just of discretionary spending is what it is. That's definition for it. We are seeing an all-time high in a per month spending, which equates to about $500 billion a month, which when you look at our debt clock, it's not helping, especially considering the way that we're doing it is by just printing more money.
Exactly. I mean,
Another one of the debates, though, with the infrastructure package is that while, the fundamental issues come up as to what infrastructure is, whereas, most people would commonly think infrastructure is your roads, buildings, just common things that everybody use. It's your structure inside your country of the groundwork. However, the Democrats are pushing on the bill to include policies that include elder care or care for elderly and disabled Americans, and give other social efforts some more funding.
yeah.
Which is another interesting thing, where this is another thing that we are seeing as a partisan issue, because Biden wants to pay for it, the $1 trillion plan, through tax increases on corporations, and the Republican side does not want to hike up anything past their 21% set in 2017 when they made their general tax cuts across the board.
Right, exactly. And just a really quick breakdown. This bill would be in four sections, I guess, if you will, if you want to break it down that way. Again, the USA Today article I linked down below definitely has some great breakdown information, explanations, and charts that you can see, visualizations and all that. But it's transportation and infrastructure, so the roads, airports, train stations. Remember the Amtrak system that Biden wants to expand is also part of this bill. I would assume that's a $621 billion
Billion.
part of the pie. That also includes 174 billion just for the electronic vehicle networks, including 500,000 EV stations. Um, there's also the next section, which would be the quality of life at home section, which is the biggest part. It's 650 billion. Uh, it would be 213 billion of that would be to retrofit more than 2 million homes and commercial properties, expand high-speed broadband, upgrade and build public schools. That's $100 billion. Improving the electric grid, $100 billion. Water infrastructure, including 45 billion to eliminate all lead pipes, and 56 billion to modernize America's drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater system. That's 111 billion altogether. The caregivers, this is a really big chunk of the pie, is exclusively $400 billion for caregivers of elderly and the disabled. Um, I guess this will just be an increase in salary for government caregivers and those who not DO, but care for the disabled and handicapped in our nation. And then also the fourth chunk would be the about $300 billion for research and development and manufacturing. So I guess it would be improvements to the manufacturing systems and things of that nature. It's It's a lot, honestly. It really is a lot. This is also not including the. Listen, here's my thing, and really this should be. I think it should be pointed out. This is Biden's personal answer, and he knows. I think he knows this is the party's best bet. As a counter, his personal counter to his farther left wing counterparts in his party who wanted to put up a Green New Deal. I think this is exactly what it is. This is still an extremely expensive deal, but it's something that I believe the whole of Congress can, in some way, get behind. Just maybe not the way you pay for it, but you know, the programs that are going to be invested in, the changes in infrastructure that we both agree are most likely needed in our country. I mean, the road systems here are crumbling. The overpass systems here can be improved. The train systems, in terms of Amtrak, I'm not one who is mad at. I hear a lot of younger people saying, well, why does China and Japan and South Korea have some of the best high speed rail systems in the world? Because their government owns most of the land. Let's be honest here.
Well, and also one of the parts about that which makes it that much easier is the high-speed rail systems in China are connecting very close geographically close places, or just one or two places that are out there. Whereas you go to the United States and you have Los Angeles, Seattle or I guess it's this side. You get Los Angeles down here. You got Seattle all the way up here. You've got Chicago. And then all the way down here, you've got, Dallas and Houston. And then you've got Miami. And then you have the entire eastern seaboard, which you kind of need to take care of. So to make a literal countrywide system to get you to every major place, it's near unfeasible. However, if it could be accomplished, it could open the gates for more travel. It could open the gates for more opportunities.
Listen,
I don't see, aside from just recreational travel, I don't see how putting something that expensive down in America would help, because there's no way that you could, live in Chicago and have a job in LA and be there every day. Yeah. So,
all right. This is
exactly what I was saying. Is you have
this is the proposal. Yeah.
Right. I don't think that it's feasible aside from recreational travel, and in that case, the cost that you're going to spend to put people on that people have to buy per ticket, and that you have to pay for this, may not match up to even like airplane use or airfare use in the next 30 or 40 years by the next time that it needs renovations.
Here's my little tidbit on that as well, because I would love.
I think an Eastern Seaboard would work. Like if you had it from like a DC to Baltimore, just a boom zip train, or a DC to New York zip train, those would be perfect.
They've always wanted to try to do something with, they call it the maglev, high speed train from DC to Baltimore. But somehow it's still being opposed by a lot of different people for different reasons. I would say the main reason
land as well. I would say the main reason is you think about all of the land that is used in between those, and how many cities and how many highways are in between DC and Baltimore.
And I can see why. But
I can imagine that's only from a DC to New York standpoint, or a DC to Baltimore standpoint, which are only an hour away from each other, or like 30 minutes as the crow flies.
Yeah.
But then you look at that from a national standpoint, and it just seems like, yes, the route could work. I'm sure it would. But there's so many moving parts to that. And I can't imagine that would get finished in the next 2 decades.
Oh yeah, I mean legal litigation and red tape and all that. Listen,
they can use eminent domain, and that would be a numerous amount of court suits.
I'll compare it to this, and this you and me are going to understand this perfectly, and I hope that as many Marylanders as possible who would watch this would understand this.
I know where you're going with this.
This would be the purple line on steroids.
Yeah.
The purple line has been so far has been an absolute failure. Just in terms of how it was managed, how it ran over budget unchecked, and then finally saying the state had to take over the project instead of leaving it as a public-private partnership. They had to take it over because they were bleeding money from the budget. I think fourfold, four times over
You
in
know,
terms of the money that was supposed to
I
be
will always
spent on that
maintain
thing.
that's one of the things that happens when you give Baltimore money unchecked. Is
I mean,
it takes you it I mean we've seen it in education, we've seen it in transportation. If you don't have oversight on what you're going to spend money on, then how's it going to happen? And as much as I would love to see in a utopian world a successful, cross continent or cross continental line that we can take, there's trains and buses and stuff which are much lower budget, not as feasible, but it's a lot of money to put that together. And what did you say the number was? 400 billion.
that's 100 billion of the 400 of the 620 that are going to transportation
So only 100 billion would be going towards making that happen.
towards Amtrak itself.
Uh, and is that towards making the entire continent one consecutive Amtrak?
Yeah, because I think the
I
national
do
train
not think a
services.
billion. I don't think $100 billion is going to do that anywhere near.
I don't think so either. And then they would have to increase it and amend the law because that's what the law says. And like I said, legal litigation, red tape,
And
and
then
unchecked money is.
we're going to be the same place we were with the red line, where you get it almost done and then you need more money. And sorry, we're not giving you more money for this.
I mean,
And
I
then it
think
ends.
eventually the red line could get done. But I mean, here's the
I
thing.
agree. I agree. I agree.
And you were right about the fact that it was. Listen, the state approved it because it's two of its more powerful counties and its very powerful neighbor in between them and Virginia were in support of it. Let's be honest. This was a Montgomery County, PG County, and DC Metro
Yep.
project that the state said, "All right, I guess let's take that into account. Let's try it." Because it was the same exact thing as the ICC. Um, there isn't a connection from one spot to another without having to go all the way down into DC and like Chinatown Station or one of the terminals like that, and then going back up. You do have to like run rig them around certain types
Right.
of stations and all that.
Take a
So
stop
a purple line,
you take a stop right around Silver Spring. You hook them up there.
yeah, yeah, and so like the uh, the solution to that does make sense to put a ring around some of the more popular stops on the outskirts of your metro system where there's a huge amount of traffic that want to get to the other side of the state maybe but need to take the metro and don't want to take the extra fare all the way through DC and then back around. So it made sense on paper, but a lot of things that make sense on paper don't make sense when it costs paper.
Pretty much everything that makes sense on paper does not work in government, and I can tell you that working for the government, I can 100% guarantee you that.
Exactly. So I mean, again, this transportation bill, that's just one aspect of this transportation bill that we can you and me can dive into this heavily for the next couple weeks as they're debating this in Congress.
Absolutely.
But yeah, these are the things that really need to be considered here, and this is, I guess, why there's a lot of apprehension because I'm almost positive a lot of this money does not have much oversight, which would then cause a lot of freaking alarms in the Republican Party to say, hey, if we're going to be spending this much money,
We want
after spending
oversight.
as much money as we had, we got to have someone looking after this thing so that we don't end up with another bill, half the work done, and then needing to double our price again.
That very highly recommend or reminds me of the Kirwan Commission recommendations for the blueprint for Maryland's future in the Maryland House of Delegates and the Maryland Legislative Branch, and that happened back in 2020, and it finally went through after the legislature met and overrode Governor Hogan's veto. This is a Maryland specific thing. This is supposed to be a lot of money put into something that was going to happen. However, a good portion of this money was going to places like Baltimore or Baltimore City, rather, places like Prince George's County, where when these education bills have been given money or grants towards improving schools, there hasn't tracked very much responsibility on it. And you still deal with AC and heat that doesn't work in schools. You deal with underfunded teachers. You deal with old textbooks from the 90s. So, as part of this bill, the minority asked, "Hey, can we get some undersight or like some oversight on this? Can we, have some responsibility?" And that was one of the biggest fighting points on it. Is we know this is going to pass because there's a supermajority, but can we get some oversight because we want this money going to the right places? And I think that's what might happen here. Is in case of this, they know that they don't need a supermajority to win it because they don't have to deal with a red president. They don't have to deal with that opposition there. They just vote through with 51 and they're good. So they can do that, but the only thing that the minority can ask for is a little bit of oversight. And I think we will 100% see that happening with this bill because this is an issue that everybody would like to see fixed in their own way, one or another, but it needs improvement.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think
Oh,
if we,
yeah.
yeah, what else do we have to touch on real quick?
Right. Real quick, I'm going to spit out just two things, and you can give me your thoughts on both of those. And then we
All
can
right.
get to two more small pieces and then get to another meaty piece of our podcast. So,
Yeah.
right now, we have announced Beto O'Rourke is looking to run for the governor of Texas. And back in, 2019, a poll conducted between July 24th and 27th in Texas found him leading all other candidates by 3 points at 27%. And this was in the Democratic presidential primary. So he found a lot of ground there in his home state, but could not pull it out considering he did drop out early. And as you said, Gerald, SNL put it the best when they said that he vastly overestimated his national popularity. Another thing that I want to touch on, and then you can just give me the twofer. Andrew Yang has declared a while ago his means to running for the mayor of New York City. And as of April 19th, which is the most recent information I can find, which is just over a month ago, he was leading in first choice for mayor upon those surveyed at 22%. The next closest was Eric Adams, who is the Brooklyn Borough president. And the next closest after that is Scott Stringer, who's the city comptroller. This is people surveyed in New York City, likely Democratic primary voters from April 1st to 15th with a margin of error of 4.7%. Also, the same guy who, when interviewed, said, "My favorite subway stop in New York City is Times Square." So what are your thoughts on both of those?
I hate that sound bites really do make or break a campaign, but let's be honest, everyone knows sound bites make or break a campaign, and
especially in the age of social media.
Absolutely. So anything that can be tweeted, even in its expanded form, something that can be tweeted in a few words and have a couple of comments underneath is going to blow up a lot more than a proposal or a platform that you post on your website. It's just the way it works. But that being said, in terms of Beto O'Rourke, he was fairly close to beating Ted Cruz in a primary, but I also attribute that to being how badly people want Ted Cruz out of office. I think it's still true. I think someone can beat Ted Cruz if he has the right how do I put that, the right circumstances laid in front of them. He could,
if you have enough financing and if you have good enough campaigning.
And like we said, growing populations in the city areas in Texas could really make a difference in a statewide vote. But I think Beto has a chance, but it's just I think he's proven to me in any election that he's been involved in, primary or senatorial, or at this point gubernatorial. I don't think he has that spark of, I call it charm or charisma or just political aptitude even, where he's very set in his ways and knows how to get his base going, but he doesn't know how to reach across to find those voters who are still missing from his campaign. And I think in Texas, that's an extremely important thing to do because I think there's a lot more moderates in Texas than people would ever not realize, but care to think about. But if you're not reaching them a certain way, it's not going to bode well for you. In terms of the New York situation with Andrew Yang and the election up there for the mayor's office, I don't see him necessarily being at such a hurdle to lose, but I do think it's going to take a lot more effort on his part to make him seem more appropriate for New York. And there's just a very specific culture in New York that needs to be met, and you got to. It's a proving ground every step of the way, every single day. So you got to prove yourself to the New York voters that you are the right person for New York. Now that means being tough and doing something, that's gonna grit a few people's teeth anywhere else in the nation. But hey, it's fucking New York. Deal with it, or just stop trying to sound like a tourist in general. That's basically what I would think. If Andrew Yang can manage that, and now that he's abandoned giving away free money for voters, which, let's be honest, could have caused a constitutional crisis at some point. But if that's the case, Andrew Yang can win. I am much more interested to see how badly people want Greg Abbott out of office. That's going to be determining. Beto's going to do as much as he can, but he doesn't have that. He needs some help from the other side tripping themselves over, is what I would say.
It will be very interesting to see what he can do in the New York primary, especially considering that he is not a native New York, I would say, Islander. He is from Schenectady, which is, more so in upstate New York. You want me to say it the right way? Schenectady.
Schenectady.
Yeah, but he's from there. Very fun place to say, which is definitely mainland New York. So he's not an Islander. He's not a cityer, but I think that he will run into roadblocks because he isn't. So we will find interest on that. I will give you my thoughts on Beto here.
Yeah,
So,
let me give you a little bit of a solo thing real quick, just real quick.
Sure, that's no problem. I think that, as we had already said, Beto definitely did oversell the amount of popularity that he had when it came to the national race. He ended up dropping out as one of the later people, and in an Emerson poll between August to 1st of the Texas presidential primary voters, he was in second with 19%, trailing Biden by 9 points. So the further the race went on, and the further that Joe Biden asserted himself as the clear-cut candidate with him or Bernie Sanders going forward, he seemed to fall further and further behind as it came through. With that being said, it does not seem like he will get the fundraising to make something happen. And I don't think that he'll have the poll numbers. I think he's experienced his 15 minutes of fame there. And I think there's a lot of I thinks here because it's all perspective in politics. There's nothing you can say definitely.
Right.
Aside from Maryland will run blue. That's one thing you can say definitely. But I don't see Beto being able to pull something out here. As interesting as it would be, I don't think he has the numbers here.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's a completely valid point. It's just it is a strange situation with Beto because like I said, he's the guy that keeps on getting close but doesn't really know how to finish. And it's just
he's the Buffalo Bills.
That I think that gives him a little too much credit.
Yeah, he didn't make it to 4 straight AFC championships.
Exactly.
Or 4 straight Super Bowls. Bills Mafia, true. Rise up. Next topic on here. I just want to give you another twofer, and you can give me your responses so we can cover a little more fun. So, Maryland and nationwide, mostly sweeping nationwide, mask orders have been lifted. Now it depends on.
Got a surprise entrance from Fat Boy over there.
From our mascot.
There you go.
He'll do his business.
The Politicat.
The Politicat. Yep. Oh, man, he's away. Maryland, as well as many other states, have lifted their mask orders for all outside activities, but certain businesses still have their own restrictions that they keep on, which is perfectly understandable. And vaccines are very easily accessible all across the United States, so that we could possibly be seeing a very, very good and solid end to COVID mania and the incredible spread of this harmful virus. Another thing that I would like to pump out there, you'll see what I did in a second, is one of the major gas pipelines got hit with a cyber attack and was crippled for a short time being. And everything of that was made worse by media coverage saying that there would be gas shortages, and in turn, that we'd have to start portioning out our gas akin to the 1970s. So, Gerald, I want to ask your thoughts on those two issues.
Firstly, about the COVID numbers going down, mass restrictions being lifted. I think obviously overall incredibly positive news. Very happy to see very clearly things are getting better, and they're only seem to be getting better faster, which is just wonderful. Now let's pace ourselves. Obviously, is what I always say. You can't jump into something and then fall back on where you were. But I think the state of Maryland and overall nationwide, there's been a good trend of understanding. Okay, things are getting better. Let's open this up. Things are getting better. Let's lift some restrictions here. Restrictions on indoor dining went up from 50% to 75 at a certain point. Um, a open vaccine availability to as many people as possible, faster than most government officials were expecting, both local and national, which is always good because it means we have a good supply to give to the people. I read an article earlier today. This is just a little free tidbit that the Biden administration expects by within the next 24 hours to have achieved 50% of all adults being fully vaccinated in the country, which is an
That's
incredible stat.
incredible.
That's an incredible stat. Credit where it's due. I think they've done a great job making sure that everybody understand that it's available to them, but also not shoving it down their throats, saying, the best thing you can do is get a vaccine that we can get back to normal. And I think even people who are somewhat doubting of a vaccine or wary of getting a vaccine were more so able to find it in themselves to make that decision and take the vaccine.
Well,
I think great numbers are being shown.
Well, personally, for myself, at the beginning of the vaccine things, I've never been an anti-vaccine person, but my concern was that it had been developed so quickly, and I didn't know if the numbers really supported it, because there was that first rush to get it, and people were waiting in long lines. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit in my apartment and do my work from home and wait here while I wait this out and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And the numbers justified that the vaccines were doing their job. So I went out and I got mine. So, I'm all good on that front, and I didn't get any, side effects from it. So if you are considering or still on the fringe of getting it, I would say get it, because the worst that can happen is you get some crazy side effect, but regularly your arm's going to hurt, or you're going to be sore for a couple of days, or maybe you even get a little bit sick. But it is much better having that peace of mind and that safety and security that you can visit your loved ones without fear of passing something on, as long as they are too.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that it is the responsible thing to do, but I can't tell anybody to do anything. But I got mine, and I feel very, very good about it.
Same here. Yeah, obviously, I'll take the same approach every single time. I'm not going to force you to do anything. I'm not going to judge you for or against it, but I highly encourage it, and I think it's a great thing to do. I took a 2-dose, one vaccine with a booster shot 2 weeks later, or a month later. I'm sorry. And I didn't experience many symptoms. Literally a sore arm for a few hours, if that, and then I was good to go. So I mean, I think the HPV shots they had us take in middle school were more
Ooh.
painful than that. You remember those?
I didn't even take that. That was too big of a needle.
It was.
I'll tell you,
something else, but
I got the one dose, and I got it right in the arm, and they were like, "Yeah, it might be sore." And I was like, "Well, can I go work out after this?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure." I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to be sore, I might as well be a good kind of sore.
That's
So,
fair.
I just massaged my arm for, an hour
Yeah,
and just every occasionally and went to the gym and got some lifts in, but I didn't get anything. So
exactly.
I think that was
To
really
your,
good.
to your second point about the security cybersecurity breach at the gas manufacturing and pipeline facility. Um, I will say it was a bit of a shock, and then I think, like you said, and like I think we're both in agreement that this issue was. It was an issue. Let's be honest. It was an issue that there was a cybersecurity hack of a station. Even though I think that the shutdown was caused by its own safety measures and not someone saying, let me stop all gas flow, press this button and go. I think it was a safety measure that shut it down and said that the system itself said we're not doing anything until we can find a way to be safe about what's happening around our systems and all that. Be that as it may, it did affect supply chains and um, gas prices.
And
I
the
was
demand
driving.
curve, too.
And the demand curve went up, and that's why prices are still as high as they are right now in certain places. I will say, like I was driving around Glen Burnie near the hospital where I was going to get my second vaccine, and I took a picture. Can't really show it; it's on my phone, but I took a picture of a gas station at the corner right before you turn into Hospital Drive, and it was a Shell, and the V Power, or AKA the premium gasoline price, was at $4.26 a gallon, which is price gouging at its worst. Because the demand curve is so high, people are willing to pay for such a high price for gas because
Well, and the
the
supply curve is at such a low there. So,
yeah. And here's the thing: like I said, the supply curve is back to normal, but the price is high because of the demand and the panic that was caused, like you said, by over exaggerated reports of possibilities of an energy crisis or an oil fuel crisis that has happened. But it was literally gonna last only a little bit. But now that the supply curve is back to normal, but the demand curve is still further up than it would have been, and that summer's coming up with a higher level of travel that we've had than the last 2 years for this upcoming summer, I would say. It's gonna stay up a little bit more than it probably should be, but I think by the time the end of summer comes, September, October, November, we'll be back to pretty normal prices. But being that as my supply and demand does dictate a lot of prices here, and even though we're an oil exporting nation nowadays, it's still we still got some high prices here. So
indeed, we have one more thing to cover before we get to a little fun bat of local news, or rather, state news. Right here, I would like, Gerald, you want to take over right here on the election betting odds? That a
up,
new, fun, very fun thing has just popped up on our favorite site, electionbettingodds.com, by
yeah,
Stockle, Betfair,
and FTX.
and FTX. I forgot that
Yeah.
last one. And we use that to the brim of every analysis that we had of the election, where it would fall, how it ended up falling for majorities. And this one had us for a loop this last election. However, I think this next one is very interesting and very fun to take a look at. Gerald.
I'm gonna pull up the picture of the chart here because they show charts of differences. But this question, I clicked on it before we started the show and I noticed it, and it is brand spanking new, put maybe 24 hours ago, and this is the chance of winning, the probability, the betting odds that Biden completes his term. And it is at a 57.6% chance, which you and me can agree is pretty darn low.
That's really low.
And the probability that he is out early is a 42.3. And that's really high.
The most interesting thing to me is that the Biden out early you mentioned something else that came up, but the Biden out, this is as black and white as it is. Literally, it's, you can see there, black and white. But when you get more into the nuances of it, there's only three ways that he can get out early. He can get out early if he is unable to complete his term, in which case they invoke the Constitution and put in his vice president, Kamala Harris. If he passes away and through then is unable to complete his term, and then his VP, Kamala Harris, comes in. And then the third one is if he gets impeached and convicted and removed, or impeached and removed from office. And those are your three options for ways that he could be out. And that is completely interesting to me because you mentioned, Gerald, the odds right now of him finishing out his were currently at Vegas a plus 200 or a minus 200 for him finishing out his term and a
Right.
plus 600 for him being, was it plus 6 or 8?
Plus 600.
Plus 600 for Joe Biden being impeached to remove, which is ridiculous to me, considering not one point in his presidency so far has he done anything. And please leave in the comments if you think he has. I like this interaction that we can get.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I don't believe that he has done a single thing that warrants impeachment. And to be a plus 600, if I could find a way to short a betting market, I would take out my life savings. I would take out an extra loan against the bank to make this, because I assure you this man is not going to be impeached, and any of the other three things or two things that could have happened beforehand would happen. So I think that's crazy. But what are your thoughts, Gerald, on the fact that his odds to not finish out his first term are so high? What are your thoughts? What do you think the reasoning is, and what do you think about it?
I've said it all throughout last year, and I'll stand by this. We've reached a level in politics where the differences between the parties and between the sides of an argument are so great that they're willing to go to whatever length to prove their point. And this is as I was reading one of the articles, this is something that just an impeachment will be driven by complete pettiness from the Republican side, if we're being completely honest. They say, I think it was Representative Kyle Morris of Georgia. He said he would vow to introduce articles of impeachment against Joe Biden for abuse of power. And I was like,
do you know what being the president is?
It means being
it means being abuse of power.
If we're being strict to the letter of the law, then yeah, that's exactly what it is. But
being able to issue executive orders means
you're using your power.
You're using your power.
And it's just it's bizarre to me, and maybe this has gone up or down because this but I don't know. The betting markets are still active with this, keeping it as close as it is right now in terms of probability. But in terms of what would actually happen, I'm with you on this. This man's not getting impeached.
No,
he's just isn't. It's not going to happen. And although political improbability has been proven wrong,
I'm going to put this out there: if Joseph Biden does get impeached, then
and convicted to be removed,
and convicted to be removed. No, even if he gets impeached, like successfully impeached, which have you seen the chambers?
I don't think that would even make it out of committee.
It would not make it out of committee. So that's impossible right now. There's not going to be another red wave that I can see coming. What I see is some fringer making a move to do it. But for anything, if it happens, if he even gets impeached, then I will eat 5 cases of sardines right here on live.
He has said it. He has put it on the internet. Therefore, it is never leaving us, people.
5 cases of sardines on live.
I will join you and eat 5 jars of
beanie weenies.
Oh yeah, that'll be good.
No, not good. No,
I mean, good for the viewership, but absolutely awful for my taste buds and stomach. But all right, I got the beanie weenies. You got the sardines.
I have the beans.
And it would be absolutely astronomically stupid if any Republican was ever going to try. I mean, unless they're one of the always Trumper type of type of Republicans that are emerging, like
Right.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
There,
Jesus.
the rest of the rest of their or the I believe it's their committee is looking to censure her, which is a very big
Well,
deal on a national level.
considering the Republican state committee of Wyoming, I think it was, censured, and they removed Liz Cheney from her leadership position for speaking out against former President Trump's claims of election fraud.
A
Uh
censure is ridiculous at this point.
what is I don't get how parties are allowed to censure who the people voted in. Does that make
It
any sense to you?
it's a very interesting, and that would be something that I would recommend all of our viewers looking up on their free time because
Right.
I could tell you what it is, but that would be way too boring and way too much time than we have on this specific podcast.
Exactly.
Um, but we will both say the odds of Joe Biden not finishing his first term are I would say a lot lower than they're posted there. I don't think I personally don't expect him to come back for a second. And
I
I
don't
think I
either.
think Gerald would join me on that because we said that when he was elected.
Right.
However, I think these odds are ridiculous. Now, on to the more state local where we get to finish out this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Gerald, right now we are looking at 1 year from now, or a year and 6 months, 6 months and a week from now, we are looking at voting in a new governor for the Maryland state legislature, Senate, and everything. A new governor. Now, tell us, right? Are there any polls out right now?
I wouldn't say. I would have to look into this. This would be something that definitely you and me can bring back next week if we can find a time. But look into with even more detail. But I would have to do my regular rigmarole research and conglomerate all that stuff from probably the Baltimore Sun probably has some stuff out there. Polling data.
Well, first,
I think
I want to introduce
one
that.
change research slash one voice Maryland has some poll out there for the Democratic side, but that's the only one posted right now in public view.
I want to also introduce, though, that as of right now, Larry Hogan, he is on the end of his second consecutive 4 year term. And we have certain laws in certain states, and I believe Virginia is one of them. But Maryland is also one where a governor can only serve 2 consecutive 4 year terms. So Larry Hogan is not eligible to be voted for, or rather to run for office and be voted in on this third consecutive. However, he would be able to 4 years from that date to be elected.
I Yeah, I
But
believe
I,
I
I
believe
do
that's the way it works.
I would not see him making a run again for that. I only see upwards or sideways movement.
I can see that definitely. We can discuss Larry Hogan's possible future endeavors in detail again in another podcast. But right now, focusing on who the new governor of the state of Maryland is going to be, there have been some declared candidates on both sides of the aisle, some potential candidates, some candidates who have outright declined. Um, but man, I don't see many right now who, or at least I think Maryland is primed for an independent candidate, possibly, or a third party candidate, like a libertarian who can come in and Maryland, the environment, political environment in Maryland seems to be a lot more towards the middle and moderate, which means there's a lot more working together from the chambers in the state delegate house and the state senator's house and the governor's mansion. They seem to be doing a good enough job. And I think a lot of that credit is due to Larry Hogan's ability to work both sides of the aisle and be a good leader who knows how to get things done in this state. I think he's done an exceptional job as the governor. I think he's made more beneficial decisions than missteps, which is hard to say for a leader in executive office. But I think Larry Hogan has the potential to do some pretty great things even after he leaves the state house. But I'm going to run down the list of Republican and Democratic candidates, as in order of those who have declared their candidacy for the nominees or the nomination from each party, and whoever wants to be the next governor of the state, and we can go from there. But this is, again, I've already talked to you about the Republican list, so I'm going to go a little quicker through this. Is Robin Ficker, who is the former member of the Maryland House of Delegates, attorney, sports heckler, and perennial candidate. We also have Kelly M. Schultz, Maryland Secretary of Commerce, former Secretary of Labor, and former member of the Maryland House of Delegates. That's the only two on the Republican side who have declared their candidacy. Now, someone who has expressed public interest is Michael Steele, who is the former lieutenant governor of Maryland, who served under Bob Ehrlich. He ran for the U.S. Senate in 2006 and former Republican National Committee chairman. Other potential, not necessarily expressed public interest, but other potential candidates include Jeannie Hadaway Riccio, Maryland Secretary of Natural Resources, former member of the House of Delegates, and 2014 candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Maryland. J.B. Jennings, the former minority leader of the Maryland Senate. Alan Kittleman, our former Howard County executive, who you and I are both have both seen under we have lived under his leadership in Howard County. Personally, we think he'd be a very great candidate and do a very fine job in the governor's mansion.
Personally, I also know him as a very good man. So
that you also know him as a very good man. He's come into your political science class. You also work for one of his
relatives,
members, I think.
Correct.
One of his relatives, yeah. So very knowledgeable on him and his ability to lead. We also have Wendy Peters, who is the Special Secretary of Smart Growth. Steve Schuh, who is the former Anne Arundel County executive. And Christopher Schenck, Governor Larry Hogan's chief legislative officer, former state senator, and former member of the Maryland House of Delegates. Now, these four potential candidates have already declined their interest in the position or the governor's office. That is U.S. Representative Andy Harris, who is running for re-election. Kim Klacik, nominee for Maryland's 7th Congressional District in 2020, and is running for either U.S. Senate or U.S. House of Representatives in the upcoming 2022 election, I believe. So she is not going to be focusing on the governor's mansion. Current Maryland Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford. He's been Lieutenant Governor since 2015. Does not have any interest in running for the governor's mansion. And also Barry Glassman of Harford County Executive, and he is actually running for another position in the administration. He's running for the comptroller position. Now, we have discussed our Republican counterparts. We have not discussed the Democratic candidates who have declared, and the list is longer, if you could imagine.
I would imagine. It's almost a lunch list. Because as we are aware with the Maryland, especially in Baltimore mayoral candidate race, that is a tough order to try to name everybody.
Yeah. So let's
go through the people who have declared that they are running.
This is the list of declared candidates from the Democratic side. Rashawn Baker, who is the former Prince George's County executive. He did run for the governorship last election cycle with Governor Larry Hogan. But if you remember correctly, he lost in the primary to Ben Jealous after Ben Jealous received a what's it called when one candidate an endorsement from the
DNC?
Bernie Sanders.
Yep.
From Bernie Sanders. He received an endorsement from Bernie Sanders, and it really pushed him over the top that little bit just to win out the primary. So Rashawn Baker, again, former Prince George's County executive, which my running joke is you ran Prince George's County.
Which is separate from Maryland.
Basically, especially if you consider their diplomas. Jesus. Baker, former Prince George's County executive. We have John Barron, former nonprofit executive, expert in evidence-based policy, and former federal official. I would put the word expert in quotations because I would never take Wikipedia at face value. Um, Peter Francourt, the current comptroller of Maryland.
That
Uh,
that would be a very reasonable person to run something on a state level,
I
especially when
think
it comes
so
to
as well.
governorship.
Yeah, definitely. I like I said, you and me are not necessarily always partial to Democrats, but we know a good candidate when we see one.
Right.
Um,
I'm not
Doug,
partial to anybody.
that's also true. Doug Gansler, the former Attorney General of Maryland and candidate for governor in 2014. I'm less familiar with him, but he seems like a very stand-up person. Not very much political history, I would say, but he was the Attorney General. Uh, Ashwani K. Jain, who is the former Obama administration official. I don't know any more than that. That's all it lists. Um, John King Jr., former U.S. Secretary of Education. Now, if there's one thing you and me know about the state of Maryland is we take pride in our ability to have a good education system.
However,
However, um,
if you are a secretary of education or a politician having to do with the education system, the words are written out for you, and it is LOSE because there is nothing good that can happen to you after that. You will always
yeah,
take flack for anything that happens.
yeah, I mean that's just the way it works. Honestly, I mean, I didn't think Betsy DeVos is the worst education official I've ever seen in my life who has ever held office, but a close second to that was Renee Foos. Do you remember
Yes,
Renee Foos?
unfortunately. The foos is loose.
The Foos was loose, and then they cut Foos loose with a early retirement settlement that was
A golden parachute,
millions
I'll
of
tell
dollars.
you.
Anyway. Moving on from that. Yeah, so John King Jr. and Mike Rosenbaum, who is a Baltimore businessman. I would
Interesting.
say
Sort of a Michael Bloomberg type deal.
almost Rosenbaum. If I can get just a little bit more information. Um, founder and chief executive at Arena, a recruiting and workforce technology company. He
Oh,
has never run for elected office before,
okay.
though.
So nobody.
Basically, he has no political experience.
There you go. Well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, that we'll see how that works. Publicly expressed interest is the author and former CEO of Robin Hood Foundation, Wes Moore, and former Democratic National Committee chairman and former United States Secretary of Labor and former Maryland Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez.
That is a lot of acclaim to bring to the table.
Yeah, but also a lot of
Unfortunately,
baggage that can come with it.
right. The only thing I would say is right now on the table, there's not a lot of people with name recognition aside from certain, areas or certain arenas that they may have participated in the political scope. So it'll be interesting to see what everything comes down to. And we'll have
Yeah.
more information as months and months and months pass.
Now this is a huge, and I
We
mean
are a
this is
we are a year and a half out from
yeah,
results.
exactly. And this is a huge, by the way, list of potentials. I just want to very quickly run down this list of potentials who have not declined but have not expressed interest publicly in trying to run on the Democratic side. You thought that one was a lunch list. This is a laundry list. All right, is Angela Also Brooks, the current Prince George's County executive and former PG County state attorney. Calvin Ball III, Howard County executive currently. Anthony G. Brown, U.S. Representative, former Lieutenant Governor and nominee for Governor 2014. John Delaney, former U.S. Representative and candidate for President in 2020. Donna Edwards, former U.S. Representative for Maryland's 4th Congressional District and candidate for U.S. Senate in 2016. Brian Frosch, the Attorney General of Maryland. Interesting that they would put him on the Democratic side, but you never know. Well, I think attorney generals are elected separately, are they not?
I do believe they are.
Okay, in the state of Maryland, then that makes sense. Ben Jealous again, possibly doing that again, as he was the nominee for governor in 2018. Kwesi Nfume, the U.S. representative who took over former, now past the late Representative Elijah Cummings' seat in Congress, who won that in a special election. Former president of the NAACP. Also, eligible again to run now, former governor of Maryland,
Martin O'Malley.
Martin O'Malley.
If Martin O'Malley runs, I will immediately quit being in Maryland.
I think I can live here. I'll just make sure I get a bigger payday. But okay, Martin O'Malley, former governor and former presidential candidate in 2016. I think we forgot about that. Stuart Pittman, Anne Arundel County executive right now. John Sarbanes. Yeah. Possible candidate, U.S. representative, possible candidate for Maryland governor. Ken Ullman, former county executive and nominee for lieutenant governor 2014. Ken Ullman was there at the beginning of our Howard County journey, and then we closed out with Alan Kittleman, thank God. Krishanti Vagnaraja, former policy director to former First Lady Michelle Obama, former State Department official and candidate for governor 2018. I don't know if this person has any relationship to Thiru Vagnaraja, who ran for mayor in Baltimore, if you remember.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I would have to look into that. Again, I am going to look deeply into this list as we continue on with this journey of looking into how this all shakes out for the future of our state. And Mary Washington, who is a state senator. And only 2 people have declined, outright declined the possibility of running. And
I'm going to guess Barack Obama is one of them.
You'd be surprised. That is not on the list. It is
Michael Phelps.
Johnny Ozlowski Jr., a Baltimore County executive, former state delegate. He's actually running for re-election for Baltimore County, so he's going to stay county executive level and not go for the governor's mansion just yet, I would say. And then David Trone, U.S. representative, he's running for re-election.
Well, we've got the list out in front of us, and the next episode that we take, we can see how it trims through, because it will start kicking up in months and months and months to go. But as it starts getting more apparent, we can update that list. But otherwise, I think we have our work cut out for us.
Yeah, definitely. We're starting to cycle back again. And you know us. We've always said, like, pay attention to every single election cycle. Pay attention to your midterms. Pay attention to your local governments. And do your research. Do the best research you can. Stretch out a hand and look for help from as many unbiased as possible sources as you can. I think local news does a lot better job of painting a good picture of just the facts for the most part. There is some dramatization, but that's just news in general. But local news will do you a better job than, following CNN headlines or MSNBC or Fox News and all that. For you in your area, Corey, I'm pretty sure it's WBAL 11,
Indeed.
ABC 2, and CBS 13. For me, since I'm closer to DC, I got NBC 4, CBS 7, ABC 7, CBS 9, and I think Fox 5. But we have our local channels. We have people who are paying attention to this race, and we're definitely going to be part of that group of people paying attention to candidates, policies, platforms as they come through, possible nominations, possible shakeups.
And compiling things to keep you guys updated if you don't want to look through 8 different people's analyses.
Exactly. So we will do our utmost to bring you the most accurate and most relevant, I think, information in terms of the governor's race from honestly from this point forward. We are on getting ready for the midterms, and we will always look towards the national scope, the international scope of things from when we get the chance. But hey, we love talking about politics, and if we can help you learn a little bit more about it and make a better decision for you and yours and for the state around you and for the people around you, hey, I think we all win there.
Indeed. And before we go, I've wrangled our mascot.
The Politicat.
The Politicat. Fat boy. Yeah, he hates being around me. Here, say hi to the camera. All right, he can walk away now.
The man, the
But
myth, the legend.
yeah, I believe that's going to wrap up our podcast this time. We will see you the next. He likes being in the camera, but doesn't like being by me. Anyways, as always, I've been Corey Tanisoff.
And I've been Jerome Mendoza.
And we will see you next time on the We Talk Politics podcast.